New York Jets. Back at it again, the State of Football, Part 86 edition here, November 30th, 2020. Welcome on in to our NFL Around the League recap show like we do each and every Monday. Of course, I am Ric Serritella, telling you like it is when it comes to the NFL draft and everything football here on the State of Football, your new home, for real football talk in the mornings. That's right. We appreciate all the love and support. Of course, this guy, John Murphy, is hammering me in the pick'em standings. He's down in New Orleans, of course, the VP of personnel for the Toronto Argonauts. He's going to have fun rubbing that in my face today. And, of course, NEC Ralph Ventre, the assistant commissioner there at the Northeast Football Conference, joins us each and every Monday for the Chop Shop. Fellas, I know you got your blade sharpened like Shiano. Some fun times going on in the Piscataway locker room. But, you know, I want to begin the show before we dive into all the action. You know, I'm seeing a lot of different things out there in the media in regards to COVID. And, you know, this is the State of Football. This is how we were kind of born into a daily talk show, was covering the COVID crisis. And here we are now, week 12, going into week 13, Thanksgiving. You saw a league high, I think it was 72 positives this past week. And one thing I want to get a couple things off my chest. First off, all the media punks out there that cover football for a living and are taking pride and joy in recovering in reporting every little positive, like, hey, I told you so. Oh, I told you so. Like, dude, what you make money off of covering football. Like, why are you getting off on that? And I see a good amount of that. I saw one guy the other day say, oh yeah, it looks like Kevin Warren was right all along. Can I smack the stupid off of your face? No, he wasn't right then, and he's not right today, okay? Because I want to see football. And so, yeah, you could see some college football games being canceled. Go ask Ty Freifogel if it's a waste of time playing. Go ask Jake Funk if he wanted to have a season this year, okay? So, first of all you people on your high horses that get off on the COVID, stop it. Stop it right now. And just, you know, stop doing that. I'm tired of seeing it. And now it's time for editors to take accountability with their staff. And this nonsense media, you guys are poisonous and you're spreading false narratives. The NFL is doing a great job, okay? And here we are. And here's the other narrative I'm tired of hearing. Oh, the Broncos should have never been in this position. I can't believe the NFL did this to them. You can come over on the holiday and get smacked upside your head too. I'm giving it all around. Because you know why? These rules were implemented and started at the beginning of the season, fools. Like, you know, do a little research and homework. You're in the media and this is the nonsense you put out there. First of all, the protocol was explained. Second of all, the Broncos turned themselves in with the surveillance camera, okay? And then you hear them, oh, well, they just took their mask off to eat together. Well, guess what? They're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed. It's the Broncos' fault. It's Drew Lock's fault. He didn't take leadership inside the quarterback room. And we sat here and we told you the number one position on a team is the quarterback. The number two most important position on a team is the backup quarterback. And we sat here and told you the number three most important position on the team this year is your quarantine quarterback. Vic Fangio, Paisan, I love you. You didn't have one. You didn't have a quarantine quarterback. So don't sit here and tell me it's the NFL's fault. Stop it. Stop it. Baltimore, you got 20 guys out for tomorrow's game. Too bad. Get over it. Make it happen. I'm tired of you guys in the media creating stuff that doesn't exist. Stop it. Okay? And that's where I'm going to start the show here. Welcome on in. Buckle up. It's a double chin strap kind of affair this morning. I'll turn it over to Mr. John Murphy. Any thoughts here on the COVID, John?
Yeah. How about the factor that on Saturday at practice, when they went out to, unfortunately, relay the news, they had a picture of all three of the Bronco quarterbacks that were left, all still standing together with no mask on at practice, when everybody's been told, have the mask on when you're not on the field, like literally when you're not on the field, have a mask on. They've told them they have the new rules. Pick and choose. You want to do it? You have it. Have the mask on. You probably don't have one completion for 13 yards. No mask on, one completion for 13 yards. And when you listen to them afterwards say, kind of makes me wonder if the NFL didn't make us play this game in order to set the tone, make us take one for the league or make an example. Yes, and probably double yes. So you choose, because nobody wants to be the first team in 100 and something years to forfeit. That's why you see the Ravens are only probably half okay with this, because suddenly here's some Steeler guys that are doing it. And the question really has to boil back down to, and it's not just for the NFL, right? It's pretty much just a systematic question to say, did we really say that 150, whatever it is, 1.5 million or something people flew or other to, they didn't just drive, they didn't get, the family truckster, the way that Ralph did. Ralph put everybody in the family truckster, and drove a couple of hours, and stuff. People were going and just randomly doing whatever for the holidays. And now the NFL is coming out and saying, because so many people in the NFL teams basically went out and did Thanksgiving however they did it, or tried to get all their shopping in on Black Friday however they did it, not online, they're leading that back to saying, that's probably the Ravens are the Ravens. They made their era. Everybody else's era is they had odd interaction with folks outside of their perimeter due to the holiday. I mean, if that's really the case, then the level of stupidity is just, it's on the individuals, right? It's on them, in groups, right? I mean, you saw college teams, and these are not employees. These are somebody's kid having to do Thanksgiving at their university with people that are all, in masks and outfits as they showed him on Saturday. And the poor kid's getting a little box meal that he had to take back up to his room. That was Thanksgiving. If you chose to do it that way, you're fine. You're not having issues. If you chose, to go do everything that you wanted to do, then you got to be willing to pay that price, right? I mean, and that's the bottom line. And you're going to continue to see what the NFL has done. That's what they're going to do. You're either going to play with who you got, or you're going to go do these rules, as many of them as they have set forth, and then you're going to play your regularly scheduled game. But, I mean, the teams that you're seeing, I mean, it's going to be repetitive now. And I think the NFL is to the point where they're probably more in line with saying, like, hey, if you're going to play the next time this happens, Ravens, or, all the teams, we're not changing 8 games just to get you done. You're going to end up playing a Monday, Thursday, you're going to end up playing with whatever you got or however you got it. And then if you want to forfeit, it's on you. And I think the NFL is going to say, we're going to stop taking all the accountability in-house, because we're the ones getting pounded by the media. We're the ones taking the kick, from people saying we shouldn't be playing, when in all reality, the mistakes are literally being made by individuals or collective individuals who had a choice. You had a choice of how you treated those 2 or 3 days extra days you had off, other than the teams that played. And I think you can tell. The Vikings, they got one guy out. They're not having a mass issue. The Cowboys have played against 2 teams that have it. They're not having a massive outbreak. So what are certain people doing that other ones aren't? And then I think you're going to continue to see the Saints got $500,000 and a 7th round pick. Now they're contesting that to say there's obviously video and things all over the place on social media to show other teams doing the same exact stuff. You got a better chance the NFL will say, hey, thanks for that information, and go find those other teams instead of taking it away from the States.
Sean Payton out here snitching.
Right. Like it'll probably go, along that line, more than anything else. But I also think, when you get back to the nuts and bolts of the weekend, you saw a lot of teams kind of shrink into where their issues are now being shown on the field in terms of what's right or wrong, with their clubs. And all of a sudden, here comes a month later, and here come the Titans again, right? Thought the Titans, when they played the Bills, that the Bills were going to show the Titans for what they were.
Let's put that on the shelf.
The Titans again kind of showing up. But now you saw 3 or 4 other teams put themselves in a situation that if there was not the COVID extra playoff, boy, we would be having a lot of different conversation this morning if all of a sudden you were looking at certain teams, on the outside looking in instead of right on the cusp still, even with 5 losses for that many number of teams.
Right. I think the 7 teams is in effect. We're waiting to see if the 8th team will kick in. Go ahead, Ralph. I know you want to chime in here.
Well, that 8th team, that thing's not kicking in, but we'll get there in due time here. I know John wants to talk about what happened on the field this past Sunday, but first, I want to go back to that opening monologue where Rick gave us a combination of Shakespeare and Vince McMahon. He had a little WWE flavor in there. Salute to The Undertaker, who has now finally retired. But I'm not going to smack anybody upside the head. But I do think it's important. It's important that the critics and the general public realize something and put something in perspective. And that is the fact that, yes, it was a tough week for the NFL with COVID cases. They had probably its highest number of positives since training camp. But, as I said, that word perspective, even with all these positives that popped up around the NFL, they are still at a fraction, and I mean a tiny fraction of a positivity rate compared to the general public and compared to the quote-unquote surge of positives that are going across the country right now. NFL is not even at 1% positive. Not even 1 out of every 100 are positive. So let's relax here and stop trying to shovel dirt on the grave of this NFL season, because it's not – they're not dying. They're not going anywhere. The NFL is marching on, and they will get all 256 regular season games in. I've said it before. I don't know how many times I need to say it before people start believing me. I mean, you just look at what the NFL has done thus far. Look at how far they've come this regular season. Look at all the attention to detail and the protocols that were put in place before the season. Look at all the money spent on testing and PPE. The NFL knew that it had to do all of this in order to pull this season off amidst the pandemic. The NFL was serious about it. And yes, there have been some bumps along the way. But to call this anything other than a complete success is being dishonest, because here we are. We have not missed one regular season game to date. I know this Tuesday game with the Steelers and the Ravens, it's a bit iffy, but we would not have missed one regular season game to date through 12 weeks if they get this Tuesday game in. And, I mean, let's just stop it, people. Let's just stop it. There's a positive test. They isolate, they identify, and they isolate. You have seen positive tests on almost every team this week, but only one team with the outbreak, and that was the Ravens. So that goes to show you 31 other teams, if they're getting a positive, they're able to identify it early enough, isolate, do the proper procedure, follow the proper procedure, which wasn't followed in Denver. And you know what? Denver, I don't feel bad for you. That's your fault. I have to admit, it would have been pretty cool to see Rob Calabrese, a former Wagner assistant coach, suit up as the quarterback. But with that said, follow the protocol and wear the mask. The other thing is, too, I'd hate to say that, I hate to brag about my Buffalo Bills, but there's a reason why Jake Fromm has not practiced with the team the entire season. He's on a separate routine, a separate regimen. He's listed as a non-participant in practice or a limited participant in practice every day on the injury report for other reasons. And that's because they keep him away from everybody else. So if Josh Allen and Matt Barkley test positive for COVID, we can throw Jake Fromm in there. Would I be confident with a rookie like Jake Fromm taking the snaps? Well, that's another question. But at least you have someone in there who's played the position. I mean, who's a quarterback. But I know I'm kind of going on long here, but I, like Rick, had to get this stuff off my chest. And one other thing that really bothered me before we go into the actual football talk, I would love to mention these government orders or these government restrictions that were put in place in Santa Clara, California. And listen, I get it. COVID is real. Folks are testing positive. Most folks are okay, but there are those vulnerable folks. There are people getting sick. There are people in hospitals. There is an uptick of positive tests for COVID around the country. I get it. With that said, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? In other words, what does that have to do with the NFL's operation in Santa Clara County? I don't understand. The NFL, they're testing these guys every single day. They have specific protocols. These players are safer than anyone in the general population. Not to mention, what is Santa Clara County trying to prove by prohibiting the 49ers from operating, especially with no fans? Not just in the United States, we've seen it all around the world that professional sports can operate safely and responsibly amidst a pandemic. You saw it in Korea. You saw it in Europe with soccer. You saw it with baseball here in the United States. You saw it for the last 12 weeks of the NFL. I don't see one COVID hospitalization that has been traced to an NFL operation. So how all of a sudden is it unsafe for the NFL to operate? That is craziness out there in Santa Clara County, California. No perspective. No perspective.
Yeah, I've sat here and I've watched the governor of New Jersey and California squeeze the small businesses, choke them to death. Just a slow death. They're killing them. Now they're trying to take the 49ers and make them move to Arizona. And so here we are, week 13. Let's jeopardize everybody else. Let's put the 49ers in Arizona, go move their 70 staffers and team over there in Arizona now. And who knows how long that's going to happen. That could wind up being for the rest of the season. Clearly, we can spend an entire show about this topic. We're halfway through, so we'll shift gears. And I promise you, we will get to the on-field action. But due to the whole COVID, due to the Ravens and Steelers, two headlines that kind of got buried here, David Caldwell, speaking of axes, chopped in Jacksonville. Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, they get the axe in Detroit, John. I don't know why the coach there in Jacksonville wasn't right behind Caldwell. I imagine he will be after the season. And I now believe that Adam Gase has not been fired strictly due to the fact that the Jets have not made the determination if Joe Douglas will be exiting out that door along with him. I think these two might now be tied to the hip. But thoughts? I know the Lions owner said they want to get it right. Look no further than this panel. How is it that we know about a quarantine quarterback, but pro people making millions of dollars can't figure it out? Because I guarantee you hire this staff right here, Super Bowl within 3 years, but that's a whole nother show. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think some of it is going to be related, I think, to this COVID, situation where they're looking at it and saying, you're not bringing anybody else in. The guy's already getting paid through the end of the year. And for them to say that, yesterday after the game, not only did he meet, to share the fate with David Turner, but, went ahead and met with Marone and told him, share with your staff, you're going to be here through the end of the season. I think you're making different decisions, right? You have a guy there, that's been a GM and been a good one, and then has worked in the league office. So down the stretch, with no trades, there's nothing really happening movement-wise. You can let Trent Baalke kind of, run the show for the rest of the season, without too much issue going on there. And I think in some ways, some of the teams want the press out there that those jobs are available. Whereas I think in the Jets scenario, we keep mentioning it, the factor that the real guy in charge is not even in the country and headed back at a certain point in time, that's when we'll really know what's happening, in this scenario. And when, I think when Joe Douglas has to talk about, free agency, the draft, his opinion of Andrew, and then more importantly, his opinion of what they have to do next. To me, it's going to get interesting when all of a sudden the candidates that people would have thought would have been his possible primary candidates, they're not looking so good. It's Greg Roman, not so good on your list of, potential head coaching candidates kind of here at the moment. But I think that the Jets scenario will play out more over time. They already knew what was going on in Detroit. You can't come in there and say like, hey, the playoffs isn't good enough. We want it to be better than just a playoff team. And now you shrunk back down to being, at the bottom part of the league. The good news in Jacksonville is, amazingly, Caldwell ascended quickly from that Atlanta team to Jacksonville and getting all the power, then lost some of the power after the Gus Bradley, head coaching time frame. And all of a sudden, Coughlin got it. Coughlin then didn't really get along or didn't make it work. And Caldwell got it back. So somehow, he kind of made it through that and gets to the other side. And now the good or bad news for him is, depending on what the next person does with what he left them, that could kind of make this over time look a little better than where it looks today, in the sense of the Jags, much like Miami, the draft may be held in Cleveland, but the draft is really being held in Florida when you consider Miami has 2 1s and 2 2s, and so does Jacksonville. So you're leaving behind enough ammunition there for a new person to decide on the quarterback, have the young players that they've got in the last couple of years, and have a little bit of cap flexibility due to the trades that have been made. So you're kind of giving a clean slate there. It's just a question of, can you work with a group of people that are very heavily involved, that are very heavily invested in sports around the world, not just, in the NFL, and somebody who you probably have to have a few extra conversations with as an owner than maybe you would be normally used to in some other organizations or situations. But they do have a large number of resources. You got to admit that, and it is a place where you can win. You just now have to kind of re-engage that fan base, and I think, make sure that you're on the right track of who's your quarterback, what are you doing in that situation, and then make good use of those picks. And down the road, this will look a little different when people take a step back and see what happened, because the problem for Caldwell is, you probably did marry yourself to Marrone. And when last year really wasn't what it was just sort of a good little stretch with Gardner Minshew. You kind of were both then doomed, to that situation, right? Yeah. And who knows, what would have happened if you had, made a different choice or gone a different direction, with the coach, because like I said, you are set up to have, like I said, you have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, and you have all that cap space, that you've done a good job of clearing out. So the Jaguars will not be as much in a pinch if the cap's now back down to 175, 190. They'll have some wiggle room to do some things. And like I said, you have 4 really quality picks. And when you start taking the quarterback out of the equation, and then you start looking at yesterday, they played two rookie wide receivers, both productive. They have one of, if not the most productive rookie running back, in the league. And then you go look at the other spots, and they have somebody at each level of defense, that was a high quality draft pick who have shown the ability to be above average at their position. It's not a total loss team to think that they can, in the next 2 to 3 years, be re-engaged as at least a playoff caliber, contender there, if they do the right job of hiring folks. To me, that job, both of those jobs are interesting jobs for different reasons. Detroit being that we saw last night, the Bears are what the Bears are. The Vikings have their own issues and money, and cap problems. The Packers are good against these type of teams and not anybody who has a winning record. So the Lions, they have resources. They have somebody who's fully invested in the factor that she wants to be the owner, the person in that family, right, who turns the corner with that group. And if she would follow what the Titans have done, I think you got a chance to see what's happened successfully in Tennessee when ownership has changed. Detroit, follow that model, and you'll have yourself an opportunity to really get to be a challenger, because nobody in that division is showing that they're a real challenger to the Packers.
No.
And the Packers are only as good as the best 4 or 5 players play against the best teams.
Well, I will say this. The Jacksonville, the cap space is almost a nightmare situation if I'm taking that job, because 1, I think you do have to overpay guys to come to Jacksonville. 2, it's the worst way to build a team, and that's where you get into trouble, is having cap space. So, I do like the draft equity, but you've got to nail the quarterback. Detroit, I think it's time to move on from Stafford. 12 years he's been there. They've never won the division once. They've never won a playoff game. I don't think they even hosted a playoff game. So you're not that good, Matt Stafford. I'm sorry. It's time to move on. And it's funny because you look around the league now, Quinn and Patricia in Detroit, Thomas Dimitroff in Atlanta, Bill O'Brien in Houston. It's like 90% of these guys getting fired all come from New England. So how is that going to impact this next hiring cycle when guys are looking at Nick Caserio and Josh McDaniels and bringing those? Ralph, I'm building it up. I'm coming right over to you, because now you've got Detroit, you've got Jacksonville, you've got Atlanta, and Houston. Oh, by the way, Houston 4-3 since Romeo Crennel's taken over, and Raheem Morris, I think, is like 4-1 now. What happened to Atlanta yesterday? I don't know if you think if those guys have a shot of keeping those jobs, but Ralph, your take on these openings.
What happened to Atlanta? We don't have enough time to go there, but to keep it simple, Matt Ryan is another quarterback like Matthew Stafford who should be on his way out. Matt Ryan and Matt Stafford, I look at them very similarly. Ooh, that's a tough one to say. But no, they're very similar. They're stat compilers, but they don't have any real wins to show for it. And the only game we will remember in Matt Ryan's career will be a 28-3 loss, or 28 to the you know what I'm saying here, the Super Bowl, where they were up 28-3 and they fell apart. That's what you'll remember about Matt Ryan's career. Anyway, getting back to what you were saying, Rick, about the GM and the coach pairings and the coach hirings, what really fired me up there for a second was all of this Belichick talk, the Belichick disciples, the Belichick tree. And you know what I think? Maybe, first of all, none of these guys are Bill Belichick, okay? When you hire them, you're not getting Bill Belichick. The other thing is, and the more important thing is, you're also not getting Tom Brady as your quarterback. Bill Belichick is a Hall of Fame coach, okay? There's no arguing about that. He's owned the AFC East for the past 20 years, so I'm not going to talk smack on Belichick, but maybe, just maybe, there was a little bit of Tom Brady's influence on Bill Belichick's success. And maybe Bill Belichick is not this genius who just churns out coaches left and right, because he doesn't. When are we going to stop with this? Charlie Weiss was a failure. That McDaniel, he was a failure in Denver. All these guys go. Romeo Crennel, nice guy, but how many different jobs has he had since he left Belichick? He's bouncing all around. Nobody wants to keep him. Maybe the Belichick tree is really it's a dead piece of lumber that needs to be cleaned up here with the fall leaf pickup. I mean, that's that. Let's just be honest. Just because it was the same thing with this Sean McVay. When Sean McVay burst onto the scene, anybody who ever had dinner with Sean McVay was all of a sudden a hot coaching candidate because he must have rubbed off on them. They must know everything about offense now because they're friends with Sean McVay, or they were roommates with Sean McVay 20 years ago. Like, it was the same thing. You have to realize that, yes, just because these coaching candidates may be influenced and they may have learned under Belichick or McVay, they're not Belichick. They're not McVay. Stop hiring them. They're not good.
Well, speaking of that, we will have Jeff Benedict, the author of The Dynasty, here on Wednesday's show. We'll spend a good amount of time going through his new book. I would classify it as a novel. The
Dynasty is Tom Brady. We're seeing that this year. Even though Brady is on decline and he's not what he used to be, look what Belichick, he can't do it without the quarterback. Don't give me that 1 year of Matt Castle, the aberration. Show me what Belichick did with the Browns. Show me what Belichick's done without Brady. Belichick lined up against Belichick's Patriots lined up against Rex Ryan's Bills with Jacoby Brissett, and they lost 16-0 at home. That's Bill Belichick without Tom Brady. The evidence becomes clearer every day. That was Brady's dynasty, not Belichick. And can we please ask his son to cut that ridiculous mullet? All right, thank you. I'm done.
All right. Well, hey, Brady, I think, they needed each other. I think Brady probably, just like any other team in the NFL, any Super Bowl team, the quarterback is the most important ingredient, right? So without the quarterback, you just don't win titles unless your name is Trent Dilfer.
And that's what Dave Caldwell's problem was in Jacksonville. It wasn't hitching his wagon to Marone. It was, you don't have a good quarterback here. Mike Glennon. We're recycling Mike Glennon. I mean, come on.
Well, because they thought
they made that same move twice, and you look at it and say, in any organization, if you do the same thing multiple times, you're probably going to end up, kind of regretting it. When the Jaguars upset, was it the Steelers in the playoffs with Blake Bortles? And then they doubled down, right? They doubled down and gave him a contract when you should have just said that game was what it was. And it wasn't like you saw an epiphany and it was Blake Bortles that won you that game. But you made that mistake. And then again, I say what I think you saw with the Gardner Minshew, you should have watched that film and come out of it going, how did we win some of those games?
Yeah.
Right. And then just walked away. And that's why I said it's a very fine line. Not saying they aren't doing good things in these places, but down the stretch of the season, there is a very good chance the Texans can come back and get amazingly close to a 500 record because you have winnable games and then you have 3 division games, and one of which could be a no contest in the sense of after the Titans won yesterday, depending on how the Colts play twice against the Texans, you could have a final game of the regular season that is got no value and nobody's playing. No Tannehill, no Derrick Henry, no anything for the Titans. And if Houston gets to 7-9, right? If the Falcons get to 7-9, you better go back as an entire organization and clearly watch the games down the stretch before you decide just to double up and keep the coaching staffs as is and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe this doesn't have to go all the way to the rebuild, all the way to something brand new. Better be really careful with that type stuff because, again, we're starting to hear it, right? You heard it yesterday, in the Bengals-Giants game, right? All of a sudden, all these losses are piling up, and some of the players are like, that's what we get for hiring, who's this Zach Taylor dude, that they hired as the head coach, right? So now you're starting to hear it there, but I think it's a very interesting dynamic that, the teams that when you get to that second half or the back end of a season and you kind of hit lightning in a bottle, with the Gardner Minshew or, here where the Falcons are, catching these teams at home, and you go watch that again. And clearly, this was the time that the Raiders come east and it just, there's nothing, So now if you don't look at all that and you're just looking at the wins and losses, or you just look at, 43-6 over a playoff contender and move on, and you don't really look into what's going on there, you can make a mistake that'll kind of add to this duration of things because you're not going to extend guys like that. Maybe in Crennel's standpoint, you could. You're not going to extend a guy that's a replacement head coach, interim head coach, give him a 2 or 3 year contract, hire a new GM, and then turn around and fire the guy next year if he's 7-9. I mean, I think you have to really look at your organization and decide what are the optics here, right? What are you really trying to get to, right? So Detroit, a 9-7 season, it looks like a Super Bowl, right? The Falcons, with what they've been through, you have to make a decision at year's end. Are you keeping Matt Ryan and you're going with him to the finish line, or are you trying to make a trade, accept the cap situation for 1 year, and load up for the future? If you're Houston, do you want to be the guy that trades J.J. Watt? God bless. You don't want that on your resume as the first-year GM. But if you keep Romeo Crennel,
would look like a good move, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you're keeping Romeo Crennel,
would be a good.
If you're keeping Romeo Crennel, you're keeping a lot of those vets. And if you move away from them, you are clearly trading those guys because they are going to be very sore about you getting rid of him after they finish down the stretch. Like I said, probably 7-5. They're 4-3. There's a very likelihood with the schedule they have left, they could go 7-5, with Romeo Crennel. And then that's going to be a problem, where
I think Jack Easterby wants that though, right? Because he has a guy that's kind of a puppet, right? And so I think Easterby would want nothing more than to say, hey, come in here. We've got a head coach. Here's the GM job. I'm still doing what I'm doing. And so I think Easterby is actually rooting for Crennel to keep that job. Whereas, I think Raheem Morris has earned it. I really do. And you saw, we were texting yesterday, like Raheem Morris was on that John Gruden Buck staff back in the day. And so you saw what he did to Gruden yesterday. That ain't a coincidence, folks. That's just the old school classic beatdown. And I don't know. Like, he was 32 years old when he got his first head coaching gig. The guy's paid his dues now for over a decade. 12 years ago that was. Like, why is Josh McDaniels being mentioned? Why can't Raheem Morris get a job? But I'll tell you this, and I'll go over to Ralph on this because I might get him excited here. You talk about Belichick versus Brady. Well, hey, the Bucs are clinching on to that final playoff spot in the NFC, while New England is clawing themselves back into the mix. They're in the hunt with that last second field goal upset over my Cardinals yesterday. But there is still a possibility here, Ralph. The Patriots may make the playoffs and the Bucs may not.
The Patriots are hanging on for dear life there. They're in the hunt, quote unquote. But then you do have the Bucs who they've been sliding, and there's no question about that. The thing that's interesting there is whether or not there's any substance or truth to the rift between, or the supposed rift between, Bruce Arians and Tom Brady. If you want to analyze Bruce Arians' comments to the media over the course of the season, yeah, he's not shy to put blame on his quarterback. But Tom Brady is a big boy. He's 43. He can handle that criticism, and that blame and that criticism should only affect Tom Brady in a positive way. Maybe Tom Brady's ego will get in the way here. I have no idea what's happening, but it's clear Brady is struggling. I think just his physical abilities are what's starting to decline, really catch up to him. There's all that talk about the deep ball. They haven't completed a pass more than 15 air yards, so on and so forth. So it's clear that Brady can't do what he used to do, but he still knows the right place, where to go with the ball, the right time. He still is Tom Brady, just with a less lethal arm. The Bucs, though, they got to get it going. Brady and Arians, I obviously don't think that's a long-term marriage, but they have to try to make it work for the next 6 or 7 or 8 weeks, however long it may be. But with that said, I don't have any kind of inside information. I don't know if there's a rift between Arians and Brady, but obviously the Bucs aren't playing as well as they were, so you want to try to find a reason. And of course, the media is going to play detective and try to analyze and sometimes overanalyze any word that any of the coaches or players say.
Yeah, I saw the Tom Brady post presser yesterday, and I felt like, it was pretty straightforward. And then I see again, clickbait media, trying to strum some. I think the media, again, it's a media fabrication that's throwing gas on the fire so much that they're creating the rift, right? Because they're saying, oh, well, Brady, he cut the interview short when asked about the coach, and he was off. It's like, I don't know. We'll see. Is there an ego involved? Sure. I think more importantly, the fact is, when you're 43 years old, you can go very quickly and deteriorate. I just pulled up Peyton Manning's stats. Remember coming off that neck, and he won the Super Bowl.
Great comparison. That year they won the Super Bowl, his second half of the regular season was pedestrian. And that's putting it mildly. And somehow that defense carried them to a Super Bowl win. Great comparison. You're on the game today, Rick. I love it, baby.
A little shot of espresso will help you out there. Hey, but then you look at that following season where they held on a year too late, 39 years old. Peyton Manning's thrown 9 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. So Father Time will catch you. It's just kicking in later for Tom Brady. All right, the state of football here, weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern, brought to you by NFLDraftBible.com. Hey, it's a Cyber Monday. Take advantage of our promo code Familia50, 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 and you will save 50% off of the PDF, the publication, the seminars. David Turner's in the chat room all fired up. Of course, Friday Night Scout School in the building. We'll try to get in and sprinkle some things. I'll go through some games here. BB, you saw the Vikings receiver fumble. Then he comes back, makes the game-winning touchdown. Vikings over the Panthers, 28-27. The Browns beat the Jaguars. Looks like Cleveland's going to get a playoff berth here at 8-3. But at the end of the day, who really cares? Because they'll be one and done. Titans, 45-26 over the Colts. Did not see that coming. Not surprised that the Titans won. Just didn't see it being a 20-point lopsided victory. And then, oh, don't look now. Big Blue, Joe Judge, Giants 3-game winning streak. They are in top of the NFC East, John Murphy, with their win over the Bengals. I thought Cincinnati might pull it out when we got a Colt McCoy sighting there. But now here you are, Big Blue, holding their breath for tonight's matchup that we'll break down later on in the show. But any thoughts here with what the Giants are doing?
Yeah, like I said, they were the team in the division that playing good enough on offense, good enough defense, and making enough plays and then kicking all their field goals to kind of, maneuver themselves to say, hey, they got a 3-game winning streak and they got 2 other games right prior to that winning streak that they had pretty much control of those games and then let them get away. And so tonight is a very interesting, scenario, because will this be the time that Seattle comes all the way east like the Raiders yesterday, and will they suffer the same kind of consequences? Just not sure I can wrap my mind around the Eagles doing enough to beat Seattle. Better game? Yes. Eagles outright victory in this one? Battle of the Birds, but I'm just not sure that, anything you've seen out of Carson Wentz, to give you the sign that this will be the week that he snaps out of it. Should he? Yes, because Seattle doesn't show you a whole lot defensively, and they should not be able to get a pass rush generated against the Eagles that would give you concern. But at other times, he's out there pulling the best Sam Darnold, like he's seeing ghosts, because there's just plays where it makes no sense, what's going on. And the turnovers have been unbelievable, coming from him, both the interception and the fumbles. They're going to move the offensive line around again. To me, amazingly, this game really has zero effect on the Eagles when it comes to the division. It's not a divisional game. They've played the least amount of divisional games, which means they still have a lot of Cowboy, Redskin, and Giants left in their future. So if you got 4 games left in that division, anything's possible for you at 2-2, in the AFC East. But you want to see something, right? You got to get something out of this game.
Got to get on track.
You got to at least say, let it be 34-30. Well, let it be something where all of a sudden you get a Carson Wentz, performance that you can say, okay, here down the stretch, they could do enough, to get to 6 or 7, because they have a couple of tough ones on their schedule here. And it seems like the Redskins with Alex Smith, and now we'll see how the Giants go, because the Giants follow up and the Giants get Seattle next, but the Giants are going to likely play the Seahawks, with Colt McCoy at quarterback. And so that'll be a whole different, scenario. If you're not with Daniel Jones, for the next week or 2 with a hamstring, or you have Daniel Jones, but his mobility is limited, and unfortunately you're going to Seattle, where Seattle is playing at Philly. Either way, that's probably a loss, for the Giants. So, that gets you to 4-8, so again, the Eagles, it's really like first team to 7. All right, so we got 2 teams at 4, 1 team at 3. First team that's out.
I have a hard time getting any NFC East team to 7 wins, but here we are. Eli Manning doesn't miss a game in 15 years, and here we are with a hammy, a hammy. Really, Daniel Jones? Come on, man up, son. I'm hearing that Jalen Hurts actually split first team reps with the Eagles during practice this week. So, Ralph, I would not be surprised if Carson Wentz continues to sputter out of the gates like we've seen. I think you could see Jalen Hurts come out and start the second half here.
Yeah, of course, I'm a little partial to Carson Wentz, being that he's from the football championship subdivision, a number 2 overall draft pick out of North Dakota State. I liked him coming out of college, and I really wanted him to succeed. But I have to be honest, outside of about an 8 or 9 game stretch he had prior to the ACL injury, he's really been a gross underachiever at the NFL level. I don't know exactly why. I haven't followed Philly that closely. But this year, I think he's almost bottomed out. You hear reports that Carson Wentz is, quote unquote, a broken quarterback. Not exactly something you want to hear if you're an Eagle fan. Yeah, Carson is just, I don't know what the problem is. The one thing I have said before, and maybe there is some substance to it, the Eagles lost Frank Reich after that Super Bowl victory. Frank Reich, the offensive coordinator, went on to coach the Indianapolis Colts. Maybe there was something with Frank Reich and that offense, or Frank Reich's relationship with Carson Wentz. But Frank Reich has been gone, and Carson Wentz days as a starter may be gone pretty soon as well if something doesn't change. With that said, we all were scratching our heads when they made that Jalen Hurts pick. What are they doing? What's going on here? Why is Philly drafting a quarterback? They have Carson Wentz. Well, maybe they weren't sold on Carson Wentz. Maybe they wanted some kind of insurance or reinforcement for Carson Wentz because they thought that this was a make or break year. And Carson Wentz is folding, and now they have a decent quarterback prospect to turn to, maybe develop into a starter. If that doesn't work, another year or two, you draft another. But maybe Philly knew something that we didn't, and that's why they drafted Hurts.
Well, I think they did Foles a favor, right? They knew they couldn't afford him. They did him a favor, cut him loose, let him link up with another team. And he actually links up in Chicago with, oh, by the way, you mentioned Frank Reich. Well, John DeFilippo, now in Chicago, who was the QB coach back when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. John DeFilippo, kind of an unsung hero on that staff. So both Frank Reich and John DeFilippo departing. But, hey, I think that led to the selection of Hurts because they said, hey, we don't feel confident in Carson Wentz. I mean, we won the Super Bowl without him, and the guy he's been hurt every single year. Like we called, if you read the NFL Draft Bible, tried to tell him, keep diving head first. You'll be hurt every year, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, he was hurt for a long time in college, and his college team
every year.
His college team won the national championship without him. Easton Stick, I believe, took over when Wentz went down, missed nearly a whole season, and North Dakota State still won it all. Of course, Easton Stick, I believe, is in the league with the Chargers. I think he's on their depth chart somewhere.
And if you look,
interrupt you though.
No, you're good.
But
and if you look,
the injury problems were there in college, is what I'm saying.
And every single injury at the college and NFL level has almost every single injury has become because he dove head first. And that's how he got hurt almost on every single injury of this man's career. Knucklehead. Again, you wonder, these coaches are out here collecting $1 million paychecks. Man, you get me inside a locker room, I'm convinced now. I'm convinced. I've got too much common sense. Like, common sense will prevail. And I'll go back and I'll start it off with parting shots, and I'll go back to the top of the show. The mask is not a political thing. It's a common sense thing. Okay. And so, do I like wearing a mask? Absolutely not. But do I do it? Yeah. You know why? Because I get it. I get it. It makes sense. Just do it. Right. And so, here we are, week 13. And, we're going to get through this damn COVID thing. I'm pretty confident about the NFL's persistence, the testing capabilities. Again, when you've got about 2,500 people at a minimum being tested each week, almost on a daily basis, and even last week's high watermark 72, they're doing a fantastic job here. And so again, the narrative in the media that goes against that grain, you need to have your quote unquote journalism license revoked, even though there's not much journalism out there alive in the world today. So that's my parting shot for today. I think my opening monologue really Ralph, you got me in the chat room, man. Go ahead, parting shots, brother.
Well,
put Ralph's comment up, Samantha. Go ahead.
I'm up here. But with the parting shots, I want to go back to this whole thing about COVID and the NFL, and another thing that's kind of made me think a little bit, and also it's kind of bothered me when I hear about all this talk of a bubble. NFL, you have to bubble it up right now to save the season. Bubble. Pump the brakes. Just breathe and think for a minute here. And the problem is the NFL cannot bubble like these folks are calling for. You can't bubble like the NBA did in Disney World or the NHL did in Canada. Not feasible. But you don't have to. That's what folks don't understand. When you say bubble for the NFL, to me, what that means is just restricting the athletes and restricting the team personnel from going back to their house after work every day. You would be asking the team personnel and the players to make a sacrifice where they go to a hotel and you have your own bubble. You have your own NFL bubble, 32 of them in every NFL city, where they do it anyway. They used to do it before every road game, before they're traveling the day of. You travel a day early and you'd stay in a hotel the night of. Home teams, the Giants or Jets, they're playing at MetLife Stadium. Saturday night, they all stay in a hotel and they submit to bed checks. So that would be the model. That would be the bubble. We can't throw everybody in one city. That's silly, and it's not feasible, and it's not necessary. Bubble, you'd fix the problem by just having all the players in the same hotel, isolated together as a team. And you wouldn't want to do that until the last possible moment, because you wouldn't want the players to sacrifice their family life until they had to, meaning don't do it until the playoffs. If you have to do it to get through these last few weeks of the regular season, okay, I get it, but I don't think you do. But if you want to go to this bubble format in the playoffs, it's simple. Each team stays in its own city and they quarantine, they hole up in a hotel, and there's your bubble. But it seems like everybody wants a bubble. It's either cancel the season or have a bubble. And how could these idiots not figure it out? Well, relax. They figured it out already for 12 full weeks of NFL play. Kudos to them. Kudos to the people on Park Avenue. And I've never been a huge fan, but kudos to Roger Goodell because the NFL is getting it done safely and intelligently amidst a pandemic. And there are so many challenges that are being thrown their way and so much criticism, but yet they continue on. So God bless the NFL.
Preach on, Ralph. I feel like this should be a Sunday show all of a sudden. Are we in church? We're preaching the good gospel here at the NFL Draft Bible. Of course, the NFL 175 games down. Game 176 tonight, by the way. I'm on the record for taking the Seahawks, just in case you were curious. And so there are now 75 games left to play. With that being said, I turn it over to my co-host each and every day here on the State of Football, John Murphy.
Yeah, I'd like to nothing more than to take the Eagles and then have Rick lose a game that he thinks he's going to win and have to listen to Samantha laugh at him tomorrow morning by taking the loss. But I just don't. Carson Wentz, I don't see it. I'm not buying into it. And I will say this, if you want to sit the upset alert, where you got to send the upset alert is that at year's end, one or both of Doug Peterson / Howie Roseman, that could be a surprising guy. Like if you go kind of check that out. Is there anything to do with, was it simply a COVID and safety thing that led Jeff Lurie to say, thanks, but no thanks, I'm not going to a couple of these games? Or is there more behind it to where they're saying he's kind of had it up to here, with certain aspects of things? So that might be a sneaky scenario there where, amazingly, we mentioned last week, Gettleman's going to go in with a 6-10 record and say, but I won the division. Well, guess what? There might be another group in there at 6-10 that are getting some pink slips, in the same division. So suddenly Gettleman might be a little more secured, and Roseman, there might be some issues there. Jeff Lurie has kind of been known for that. He's been tempered. Mm-hmm. The Super Bowl kind of got him a little kind of quiet, and a little more mellowed out, but he might get he might be under a little bit duress here with how he's seeing things going. I'm going to keep going back to the math, right? And I know that the professor, Marianne, and occasionally, everyone else is going to go the other way with this. Even with this recent trend, which we were all told, as if this is breaking news, right? Didn't we hear in March and April?
Second wave.
There'll be a second wave. Okay, so last time I looked, is this not that second wave? Okay, so we heard it. So if you bring it and you post it every day, everywhere, you are then making it be equal or more than what it is. Let's just stick to the facts of what it is. Okay, now how much closer are we to all getting some sort of answer in terms of, are they going to provide any of these, ideas that they're all saying it's 90%, 95%, something likely, and we're going to start getting them sooner or later? Okay. Even with the numbers that we got over the weekend, take those numbers, go find yourself a calculator, and add in the factor that there are over 360 million people that live in the United States. And you will come out with the same grand total of 3% of the U.S. currently has an issue related to having the virus. So now, if you want to shut down the world over that math, you would equally be wanting Andrew Gase running your football team. Okay? Just for argument's sake, so we end on a football note, the Jets yesterday got outscored by Jeremy Chin in back-to-back possessions. Jeremy Chin scored 2 touchdowns on back-to-back possessions. The Jets cannot score on back-to-back possessions, right? So, at the end of the day, I think, we mention it in a lot of different ways over 86 episodes. The bottom line is this something that we were not prepared for? Pretty much. Is there things we can do about it? Absolutely. Should you shut down and be doing all the things that we're doing? I mean, only reason for it is because somebody is benefiting financially. And it ain't any of us. And it's probably not the listening audience. And it's certainly not somebody who's the assistant commissioner of the NEC, because that pays minimum wage. Right? So you know that Ralph wants to get back to work. And we mentioned why, because LIU is going to go from last to first, and you heard it here first. But you know that we cannot survive doing things that way. So be smart, be accountable for yourself, and for the people that you're around. But in the bigger picture of things, we have to get out of our own way and say at some point here, hopefully by the time we get to 2021, that you can say, we all voted for what we voted for. We're all doing what we're doing. But at a certain point in time, now they have to come back to us and give us the opportunity to start going back and doing things to get your lives back to normal. Because this is not going to work for anybody. And again, like I said, go do the math. The math is where you need to get your mind wrapped around it so that you're not walking down the street worried about doing that. You're not worried about going to the store. You're not worried about going to your job. And you're not using those things as a crutch. Because guess what? There's not going to be a second and third wave of the government writing you a free check. So the people that don't mind this because they get to sit at home and get a free check, there's nothing that we're ever going to create a cure for your lazy asses. So guess what? You can have COVID if you want to, but you're also using it as an excuse and an accelerator for a lot of other things that you as individuals have control over. And that's all of us included. So if you want to sit there and have somebody dictate to you math that you've already been told was coming, a situation you were already warned about how to deal with, and pretend like it's the end of the world again, that's for a certain number of the population. And I'm okay if you want to be in your bunker. Just don't keep the rest of it in there with you.
And don't ever categorize NFL Draft Bible with any of these mainstream media outlets, because that's why we're different. We are positive. Now, all this negativity in this mainstream
not
media.
COVID positive, not COVID positive. I tested negative, baby. I took the antigen yesterday. I'm negative.
Well, hey, I'll say this. Again, I'm just tired of, and I saw this morning, like, Pro Football Talk had all these negative headlines. I see that they've now changed that because they realize, Mike Florio probably realizes what a manipulating buffoon he looks like when he does that kind of nonsense. And again, I'm just so tired of it. Like, instead of writing the headline, James Conner, former cancer survivor, tests positive for COVID, are you going to then write the headline when he comes back and says, guess what? James Conner, cancer survivor, beats COVID. Oh, by the way, was never hospitalized. Or Mark Andrews, type 2 diabetes, tests positive for COVID because you want the click. You want to create panic. Are you going to go write the story now when Mark Andrews, who, oh, by the way, hasn't been hospitalized?
A Mark Andrews who opted into the season and said, the threat of COVID never really crossed my mind when it came to playing. Someone who's an adult, who is willingly accepting the risk. I'm with you, brother. I'm with you.
Yeah, well, hey, we've had another hour of power here. I really appreciate all the love and support and the banter and all the chat room peoples that wake up with us. David Turner was up there chopping it up. We'll have him throughout the week. Of course, tomorrow, Russ Landy with their NCAA Around the League show there. I get to chop it up with those guys and talk some Rutgers football. I've been holding back on you here today. Woo! Chop it up, baby. And then Wednesday, we've got Jeff Benedict, of course, The Dynasty in stores now. We'll talk about his new book Thursday. We always hit you with a double dose of Dane Vandernat from the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, Neil Stratton of Inside the League, who does a great job with the industry insider news there. And then, of course, Football Friday with Big Law Lawrence Johnson. So, hey, and by the way, we're live 6 days a week, Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, the NFL Draft Tailgate Show, bringing you the college football pregame with an NFL Draft Slant. We can't stop. We won't stop. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.